Go more, go. What's going on, guys? In today's video, I'm gonna be trying to get the bottom end for the minivan all the way put together. So I pretty much have all the parts for it laid out over here. I have the pistons, I have the rods, we have main studs, we have main bearings, rod bearings, and then of course all the rings to go on the pistons as well. So what I've done for right now is the box that the pistons came in, I've just kind of labeled 1, 2, 3, 4 inside the box for each cylinder. And as I go and measure the ring gaps, I'm just going to keep them all, you know, where they need to go, because when you measure the rings, you want to do it per cylinder. So for instance, if I do this ring in cylinder number 1 and, you know, gap it to this cylinder, I want to make sure it stays in this cylinder because there might be some differences between the other cylinders. So the ring you gap, you want to keep it in the cylinder you gap it in. So I'll do one ring in there, ring in here, ring in here, ring in here, and then yeah, just make sure you keep the rings in the cylinders that you measured them in, and then the pistons really don't matter where those go. So I think I've gone over this a few times already on how I gap the rings and stuff like that, but for some of you newer guys who don't know how to do this, I will go over it real quick. So what I'm going to be doing is, like I just said, I'm going to take this first ring. This is going to be for the number 1 cylinder. This is the top ring. So this will be going on this top groove on the piston right here, and then I have to do it for the second one as well, and then, you know, put the oil ones on later. I'll get a little more into that, but this is the top ring, and pretty much what you do is you squeeze the ring into the cylinder like so. Might be a little tough with one hand. So get it in there, and then you want to grab a piston and push it in there upside down just to flatten the ring out inside the cylinder, and push it down, you know, good like inch or so. And what we are measuring is this little gap right there. So you need this gap to be a certain size because when the engine is running, it will expand with heat. So you need to make sure that the gap is big enough that it doesn't, you know, close in on itself, and you want to make sure that it's not too big and you'll get a lot of excessive blow by and things like that. On this exact build, I'm going to be going 19 thousandths on the top ring and 20 thousandths on the second ring. And if I can get this thing to focus, so I'm just using a feeler gauge, and then you'll just put that in between the ring gap right there. This is at 19 thousandths, and right now it does not fit because it needs to be filed down some. So most of the time the rings will need to be filed when you get them. So they make them a little tight on purpose, so then you can purposely set the gap to what you want. So that one right there is a little tight. It's actually pretty close though, so it won't need much. But I'm basically gonna go through, put all the rings in there, measure the gaps. I'm just going to be using a file like this one right here, and I will take the ring back out of the cylinder and just run it back and forth on the file it down a little bit, put it back in, and remeasure. You want to do this in little steps at a time, and make sure you're careful when you file it, because if you go too much, you're kind of screwed because you can't add the material back. So it's better to go in little steps and make sure you get it right without doing way too much on the first filing, I guess you would say. But yeah, I'm gonna get to that. So I'm gonna start by doing all the top rings first, and I'm just gonna go ahead and get the bottom rings done as well. So like I said, I'm gonna go 19 thousandths on the top and 21 thousandths on the second ring. That's the same specs that I went on the hatch, and it seems to be doing great. So yeah, I'm gonna get to it. Alright, I got the rings all gapped. I tried to do like a moving time lapse, so hopefully that came out alright. But in that time, I got all the rings done, or at least I got the first and second ring done for every piston, and I'm not even going to measure any of the oil rings. So those shouldn't need measurement. I've never measured them. I'm just gonna set them all in there and make sure they, look all right. But I've been told by a lot of people that they don't measure the oil rings, and I stopped doing it a long time ago. I didn't do it in my wagon, and I never measured them in my hatch as well. So not gonna measure the oil rings, those should be good where they're at. And now I'm going to be connecting the pistons to the connecting rods with the pin that they came with right here. So this will just slide through the piston and through the rod, which will hold it on. And then there's some retaining clips that go on each side of that pin to keep it from sliding out. So this will go like that, you know, put the rod right in there and push the pin through and put your clips on each side. And then once I get those on, I can put the rings on and then push them down into the cylinders. And then it also does matter where you put the gap on the piston rings. They need to be clocked correctly, so I'll go over that in a little bit once I get all the pistons onto the connecting rods. But that's what I'm gonna be doing for right now, is getting all the pistons attached to the rods. So I got the first piston right here, and I almost have the snap ring in place. I didn't get it all the way in, just to show you kind of how I put them in. These pistons right here came with this style of snap ring. Some of them come with like the C-clip style that have the two little holes where you can actually use snap ring pliers to open them up, and those are pretty nice to use because if you have the pliers, it makes it really easy to take them in and out. These ones are a little harder to work with, but they're not that bad. They're just a little tricky. So I pretty much just got one side started and I just pushed it in, and I'm just gonna finish it off with my fingers. So just like that, it's pretty easy. It's just hard to get it started, but once it starts to get into the groove, they snap right in. And then I'm just gonna get one side in on all the pistons, and then I'll be able to take the rod and put it through and then slide the pin through it and then put the snap ring on the other side. Another thing to note is that you wanna put the rod on the right way. So there's these two notches on the inside of the connecting rod right here. There's one on the rod itself and one on the connecting cap. You want these two notches, at least in my case, to be on the exhaust side of the piston. So that's gonna be this side right here with the smaller valves. And I'm pretty sure it just has to do with the way the engine rotates, but you're gonna want these two notches to be right here on the front of the car when it's inside the motor on the exhaust side. So keep that in mind when you're putting yours together. I only know this for Hondas. I'm not sure if other motors are different, but I know in my case, those notches go to the exhaust side. And so now that I have that first clip in on this side, and I know which way the rod goes in, I'm going to set this guy in like that and put some assembly lube on the pin right here. Just kind of help everything get lubricated. Don't be afraid to use a lot. It's always better to have more than too little. Got some lube on the pin. Gonna slide her through like so. Line up the rod. And there she goes. Went in a little tighter than I would have imagined, but still good. Still spins freely. So then after you get the pin all the way in there, you're gonna take the second clip and press it in, and it will be all together. So I just got that second clip in, and another thing, there's this little notch right here, and if the gap from that C-clip or that snap ring, if the gap is right there in that little notch, you're gonna wanna take like a flathead and scoot the gap out of the way of this notch right here, just to help reassure that that snap ring doesn't come out while the motor's running. And there we go, this is pretty much complete. Now I just gotta do the other three, get some rings on them, and drop them into the cylinders, and then we'll worry about getting the rod bearings and stuff like that on once they're in the block. Alright, so now that I got the pistons attached to the connecting rods, I can go ahead and start putting on the piston rings, and I already went ahead and got this first one done. So I'm going to be doing these a little different than how I've done my wagon and hatch in the past. So important thing you have to keep in mind is where the gaps go on the piston rings. So I'm gonna be doing this one with all the gaps completely 180'd from each other, so it will make the air have to travel you know, in between each one and take the longest path to get through all the rings. So like when the combustion happens on top, it has to pass through this gap and then go all the way around 180, pass through the second gap, all the way back to the oil ring right here, and then, you know, back and forth. So a lot of guys will just go off OEM specs for this, but I'm gonna try it this way and see how it works. I was talking to a couple of guys, so I'm gonna try this out. So I have the first ring right here on this corner on the exhaust side, and then the second ring 180 degrees from that, and then the first oil ring is right here on this corner, and then the last one is 180 degrees from that. So the air is gonna have to travel you know, all the way around, take the longest path to escape. And it's also important to note when you're putting these rings on to keep the make sure it's the right side up, because there's like these little letters and markings, and those will face up. I don't think my camera's gonna be able to focus on any of those, but they have these little letters on there, and you just wanna make sure those are facing up when you put the rings on. And yeah, and also that little squiggly oil one, the gap for that one is right here in the middle on the exhaust side. That's where I'm gonna put it. So I'm sure a lot of you guys would do this, you know, have your own ways to do this, but I'm gonna try this out and see how it goes. As long as there's not a whole bunch of blow by, there shouldn't be any issues. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get the others all put together, and then we'll be ready to put them into the block. All right, so all of the rings are on all of the pistons, but before we get those pressed into the block, we are going to plasti gauge the crank. So get that set in there and make sure all the clearances seem right. So we have all the main bearings put in already. We just brake cleaned off underneath all those, clean them out real good before we put them on. So we're gonna get the crank put on right now, tighten everything down, and take it all apart and make sure it clearances out correctly. Oh, that's backwards. All right, so now we're putting in our ARP mains. Just gotta put some lube on them. This helps for when you torque them down so that they actually spin and don't get caught up because they're dry. And then you just wanna get them all the way to the bottom and not really tighten them much, but just get them snug. You're supposed to just go hand tight, but I just give them a little snug up at the end. So we just got all the main studs put in, and right now I'm just ripping up some plasti gauge and setting it on the crank. We're gonna torque the girdle down, and hopefully everything is in spec. So I think I said in an older video I did get the crank checked and it was straight, so I know it's not bent or anything, but I did not get it polished or anything like that. So everything should be in factory spec, like for sure. Because I got this crank out of a bone stock H22A and it looked like it was in good shape. So we'll find out here in a second. All right, so we just got them all torqued down. I went to 62 foot-pounds, and right now I'm breaking them all loose. So factory spec is 54 foot-pounds, so we just went a little more since they are the ARPs. I went 55 when I did my hatch, and it was good right there. So I just went a little more on this one, and we'll see how it did. And if they're a little too tight, then I'll probably just keep this one at 55 as well. But I think it should be all right. Right about 15. 15. In between 15 and 20. Just under 15. And about 15 on that one. So yeah, those are looking good right there. That will work with me. Yeah, the hatch when I did it last, they were all like 10 thousandths, and like it was just really tight. So this one's looking much better. 15's still a little tight, but that's like factory spec, and I'm not worried about it. She'll be good. Get her all lubed up. Like I said before, guys, can never use too much lube
It's always good for something.
Yep.
And those good things.
And if you have some leftover, you can just keep it on your nightstand. And this bottle of lube has lasted me for like months. It's ever since I put my wagon together. There's some OG lube right here.
Make sure you put it the right way this time.
I got it. Just like that. Oh, almost pinched my finger. Alright. Don't forget the thrust washers. These little notches face outward.
No, bro, they face inward.
No, outward. I just asked this because I didn't remember. Alright, and now put the main cap back on and torque her down for good. Then we can put the rods in and the pistons. Good. Oh yeah, look at that butter.
Oh yeah, she's spinning.
I'm surprised it spins that freely. That's good. Alright, so we got the main girdle all torqued down, the crank's in place. So we're gonna go ahead and put the pistons in and rods. So all the rings should be set where they need to be. Just gotta grab the ring compressor, clamp it down. You guys have seen it in a previous video. Set it on in there and tap it down. And then we'll tighten the rods to the crank. And I'm also going to plastic gauge a couple of the rods to make sure that they are in spec as well, because they are used. Make sure that's on the exhaust side. Oh wait, one more thing. We need some lube.
Oh.
We need the lube.
Need the lube, bro. It's always got to be moist.
Yep.
Whenever you're putting your rod inside, you know.
Especially when you're putting the rod in the hole, you want some lube. I don't know if assembly lube's the best lube for this. I normally do oil, but yeah, I'm gonna do oil on the next ones. This shit's like so...
It's thick.
Yeah, it's very thick. It's thick with 3 C's.
It's the sauce.
This stuff's hard to move.
See, the oil's the juice, but that's the sauce right there.
Got it. Alright, I got all the pistons in. So this little step deck right here kind of made it a pain to get them in. They were kind of popping out of the ring compressor a couple times, but we got them. So now I get to flip it back over and tighten them down to the crank after we plastic gauge it. Alright, so the rods are right at 15 thousandths. So that'll work. Get them all connected and the bottom end will pretty much be done. So at least that's the last step I'm going to do tonight, is get all the rods connected and we'll call it good there. Oh baby,
Look at that.
she's gonna rip. I've never had such a pretty block before. I see what, I think, wasn't I telling you about that? Like where it sucks your hand in?
Oh yeah.
Oh, watch.
Just do it.
My hand's big enough. Oh, yeah, I did a little bit. Hold on. Watch, ready? Oh, you have to get it perfect. It'll just like
Hold on.
suck
Right
your
there.
whole hand in. Oh, see it like rip my finger in there? Oh, oh.
That's cool.
She got some suction.
Dude, that looks so weird.
Dude, it kind of hurts. It's creepy looking. Look at it. Watch.
Look, watch.
Oh.
Yeah, look at that. Sweet. That is a nice looking motor right there. Look at that. Dude, my hand was like getting sucked in.
Dude, it feels so weird. It's like cool though.
It's like,
Do you want me to hold it again?
Spot right there. You could see like my
Dude,
skin
this whole side's like
in.
curling in.
Ready?
Ready. Oh, look at the suction. Now pull your hand off. Oh. That's so funny. Yeah, go. Oh. Oh.
Dude, that's too Dude, that was hilarious.
One more. Oh.
That's hilarious.
I'll just go fast, ready?
Almost.
Alright guys, that's as far as we are gonna get for tonight. So we pretty much got the full bottom end put together. Obviously we're missing some of the accessories that go on the side, like the water pump and the pulley and the balance shafts and some other things, but we'll take care of those in another video. The hardest part is over with. We got all the pistons and rods in the block, got the crank tightened down, everything's ready to go. Throw an oil pan on it and the oil pickup and also the oil pump, and pretty much the bottom of the motor will be completely assembled. But yeah, it's getting late, so gonna get this edited and I'll probably upload it before I go to class or something because it's like already 1 in the morning. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed and thanks for watching.